something that I think is a legitimate worry about how do we make sense of a continuously existing culture and what kinds of things are important to that continuously existing culture. You might be presenting a counter argument to material culture being part of this, but I think you're right. It might do more than you hope. Right? If it works, it might actually say that and for any particular culture, the goods that count as part of their kind of cultural community are the things they currently own, like right now. And that, I think, would probably go too far. So I don't have a good reason, I don't have a good answer to just toss it aside. I think it's a legitimate concern. But right now, I'd agree that maybe it does more than you want it to. And if it does that, then that might be a reason for
I don't want it.
Trying to refine. Well, yeah, no, I know. It may do more than it may do too much. It may do more than what you think it does, I guess, whether you want it to or not. I don't have a good way to just reject it other than to say I'm not convinced that it's true, that's a good thing. That I think we might be able to make sense of those cultural items, antiquities, as being part of a culture through the course of thousands of years. And if we can't, that might have a really weird effect of saying cultural property is just sort of a nonsensical concept for more than a few days or a few years or maybe one lifetime. Right? More than 80 years, you might have a real big problem trying to make sense of it at all. So I think for now, at least, it's something to think about, but I'm not too worried about that.
I was just wondering, it seems like are the cultures that have lost their property to other cultures, like say Greece doesn't have stuff anymore because Britain took it, are they more upset because, like, say Britain won't acknowledge, like, would they just rather have, like, them acknowledge that it's their property, or do they actually want it back? You know what I mean? It's like, like, because when you're saying, like, Britain's saying, no, it's part of our heritage now, are they more mad that they're not really acknowledging that it's Greeks' property? And if they did, the Greeks could say, okay, well, at least everyone knows it's ours, but you guys can kind of still hold on to it, or do they actually physically want it?
They physically want it. They physically want it. They've even, one of the most, well, actually, the Greeks physically want it. It might vary from case to case. The Elgin marbles is the one I'm most familiar with because, like I said, it was the thing that got me interested in this whole topic in the first place. Even though it turned out the argument I worked out doesn't apply to the Elgin marbles. That's what really got me thinking about this. Whatever other people think, the Greeks want the freaking marbles back. Like I said, they designed the new Acropolis Museum specifically around having a way to display the marbles. Now, the Greeks generally call them the Parthenon or the Acropolis marbles because the Elgin marbles are a huge chunk of it, but there are some things that the Germans and the French have. And I think at least one or two things that the Italians have that they want back too. But the Elgin marbles is the big, huge collection, so that's what gets all the discussion. They even went so far that as for the Olympics, the 2004 Olympics, they said they didn't give up their claim, but they said, okay, how about this? How about we shelve for now our claims about ownership that you owe, that you need to give it back to us. We aren't conceding that it's yours, but we'll drop the argument that it's ours for now. But how about you open a branch of the British Museum in Athens so that it can be displayed next to the Acropolis where it originated, and the British can still have control over it. Okay. The British said no. But
they saw that one coming.
Well, yeah, because there's a good chance
they'll get there and we'll never get it back.
Right, yeah. The law in Athens, the law about antiquities in Greece is very, very short. I actually, when I first got interested in the Elgin marbles, I looked up the laws for the various nations and so on. Greece has a very short law about antiquities. All antiquities belong to the state. That's the whole law. So if it got there, they'd probably just keep it. Yeah. So yeah, whether it's duped, but even I mean, it's pretty a pretty transparent move. I think they really want it there. I don't think it's just purely political. I don't think it's just a matter of acknowledging that it's really ours, wherever it is. Because culturally, people do acknowledge that this is kind of iconic of the high point of Greek culture. Right? I mean that's just sort of what is so freaking significant about these things is that it's the high point of a kind of artistic style that came to fruition in Greece. And that's why, I mean, even if you go to the British Museum website, it talks about, hey, this is the high point of Athenian culture. So I think everybody acknowledges that, at least in origin, it's Greek, although they disagree about who owns it now. So I think that part's less important than they want it in Greece. Now, there's probably a bunch of mixed things there, right? There are undoubtedly some people who think there's political gain in getting control of the marbles, and there's certainly financial gain to be had. But I think it would be a bit too cynical to assume those are the primary motivations. Because not all the Greek, I mean, it is hugely popular in Greece. And in fact, in the 2004 Olympics, prior to it, people took a poll in England, and 60% of the English thought they should give them back. And they still didn't. I think it would be too cynical to suggest that the primary motivation is financial or political. I think they genuinely see this as a representation of what it is to be Greek. And that it is somehow denigrating to Greek people that they not have control over sort of the biggest picture that people, if you say, all right, tell me something about Greek culture. What image do you have in mind if I say Greece? You probably have either a Greek statue in mind, which almost certainly came from the Acropolis, or you have the Acropolis itself in mind. It's the famous picture of the Parthenon in sort of semi-ruins and stuff, which of course, by the way, is in that state of ruin because the Florentines, when they occupied Athens, stored a bunch of munitions in the Parthenon, and it got hit by a cannonball when the Turks tried to invade. I think it was the Turks. When somebody tried to invade, the magazine went and blew the center of the Parthenon up. But it wasn't the Greek munitions, it was the occupiers of Athens munitions that blew up. So they just see themselves as, is that still on?
Yeah.
Oh. They see themselves as screwed. I almost used a different term there. By outsiders, particularly about the stuff on the Acropolis. They see themselves as kind of culturally screwed for centuries. You came after the main argument. If you want extra credit, you're going to have to go to somebody else's talk.
Is it going to be online?
This? I don't know. That's them.
Yeah, it should be. We should get it up by the weekend.
So can I watch it and then write about it?
Fine.
Where would we go to get that video? Because that was the first 15 minutes.
You can like the Facebook page it's facebook.com/CSUS Phil Club, or no, Phil Club CSUS. Get that mixed up a lot. Let me double check. Just in case. I believe it's /Phil Club CSUS. We also have a, actually I'll just look at the YouTube account, because we have a YouTube account.
We posted that.
Yeah.
I can't show you over the class, but still 15 minutes.
You probably got most of the argument because the first few minutes was me going, crap, I brought my computer but not the little dongle that lets me hook it up. It's a Mac, so I can't hook up to this directly. I have to have a little adapter.
Right.
And I forgot that. And somebody went to go check and see if they could borrow a PC because I also have it on this, and they didn't have any. So I had to, the first few minutes was talking about the Elgin marbles, asking if people what people thought about that, and me hemming and hawing because of the technical glitch, which I feel really badly about, particularly since it's on tape.
How do you spell that, Elgin Marbles?
Elgin. It's a guy's name. Well, it's a position. Lord Elgin. It's a position in the British nobility. What was his actual name? I used to know his actual name. He's a Scottish guy. Elgin, Lord of Elgin, is a title. And the British just generally call them the Elgin Marble. Well, actually, the most famous title for them is the Elgin Marbles. Though some places we'll call them the Parthenon or the Acropolis Marbles. And that's typically what they're going to be called in Greece.
Okay. So it's, the website would be youtube.com/user/CSUS Phil Club. Yeah. No problem.
And I hope the argument was fairly straightforward. It was just sort of liberal tradition, the role of self-respect in liberal tradition, the role of cultural membership in self-respect, and then say, well, to maintain that, we need this minimal sovereignty, control cultural property, so we need, just nations need to give these minority cultures that minimal sovereignty, which includes giving back this stuff.
The liberal tradition is why it bases on the rights of individuals versus
Yeah.
groups.
I based it on, the liberal tradition goes back a long ways. Locke is a famous example. We were talking a little bit about that in
Right.
Phil 26 just the other day. The discussion of self-respect in the liberal tradition goes back a while, but the most famous exposition of it is a guy named John Rawls, who died 15 years ago or so. One of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. Presents most political science nowadays is influenced by Rawls, either as reacting to it or making adjustments to it or arguing that it's wrong or something. He's one of the big players in political theory now. So I just was going with the standard liberal spiel about the role of self-respect.
Because it seems like it makes it kind of funny that the cultural items are owned by the culture, but then it goes back to the rights of the individual.
Yeah, that's why this sort of occurred to me, is that most of this discussion was based on, has historically been, in like the archaeological community and in museums and stuff, has been based on rights of cultures or rights of states or those kinds of things, where there are like I said, the minimal sovereignty thing is my sort of contribution to this. Otherwise, I'm just putting together other people's ideas. There's this for about 20 years now, 20, 30 years, there's been this sort of line in the liberal tradition among liberal philosophers arguing for minority rights within the liberal tradition by arguing that individuals have a right to demand that their cultural communities have a certain degree of control over stuff, that their communities, so their cultures, have certain roles, certain kinds of rights, but the rights are derived from the rights of the individuals to their cultures having a proper place in the larger culture. So it is sort of this weird thing where I'm arguing for minority rights, but without saying that any groups have rights. Right.
I think it makes sense too, though, as far as the rights go for, columns and what have you. I think Fanon was talking about something like that, where, people can come in to someone who's already there and, acculturate them essentially, but they still never lose their own culture. So kind of what I'm wondering is if, like your claim for the people who are direct descendants, how far back would they go before it really matters to them? Because I know for me, I haven't been to Italy, I'm Italian, but some of that stuff doesn't really have that much sway for me.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how connected you would, quote, have to be in order for it to really affect you.
Right. No, that's true. And that's, again, one of those features of the ambiguity, the fluidity of the idea of a culture, which I don't have a real good definition. I don't think anybody has a great definition of how to justify maintaining it, right? other than, as I said when I was doing the presentation, that however artificial cultural identity might be, as long as it plays this role in, hey, this is what sort of maintains, this is what my cultural identity consists in, that plays a huge role in what I see as the choices available to me. As long as it plays that role, I think the liberal tradition has to take those cultural communities seriously as things that need to be protected. Even if what people think of as sort of their cultural identity is, in some sense, arbitrary, variable. At one point, in another paper I wrote on this kind of stuff, I don't think there's anything inherent about cultural communities that they play this role. I think they just happen to. I could imagine a world where the communities that play this role that cultural communities play right now, where we tend to think of nations and ethnic groups and that kind of stuff, that they're the ones that typically play this role of setting the borders of what kind of options you have. But I could see in 100 years, 1,000 years, that it might be something totally different.